Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. This week, I'm thrilled to bring you my ATX Television Fest interview with Hotel Cocaine creator and executive producer Chris Brancato, as well as co-executive producer Maurice Compte. We chat about the creation of the show, the personal ties for Maurice, how they got to the family heart of the series, and much more. It's a great interview, and I hope you enjoy. This is Les from the TV Dudes. How do you both introduce yourselves?
I'm Chris Brancato. I'm the creator and showrunner of Hotel Cocaine.
And I am Maurice Compte. I am the co-EP of the show.
So one of the things that I always find interesting is when writers or creators find their theme across their career. I know Boomtown, Law and Order, Narcos. There's definitely something about crime or that world that interests you. Chris, can you talk a little bit about what you see as the through line that carries forward into Hotel Cocaine?
Well, like many viewers, I'm interested by people who are willing to push the boundaries of legality to get what they consider to be the American dream, which often turns out to be a false dream or even a nightmare. I like, a little bit of violence, a little bit of pursuit of criminals. So I like the push me, pull you between law enforcement and criminality. I think we like those shows, those of us who do, because we're seeing people who would do the things we wouldn't go do because we don't want to end up dead or in jail. So I find that it makes for automatic high-stakes TV, just like a doctor show can be made to be very high stakes and a cop show or a lawyer show. But crime fascinates me. I can't tell you how many people come and pitch me crime show ideas, and I almost all of which I reject because all crime stories are pretty much the same.
Well, you've never thought of one, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that what I'm always looking for with Hotel Cocaine, with Godfather of Harlem, and even with Narcos is what is it that twisted on its ear a little bit? Boomtown, which wasn't my creation, had a really cool thing. It was like 6 different angles on a crime. A cop, a criminal, a newspaper journalist, et cetera, et cetera. For Hotel Cocaine, which is what we're talking about now, I wanted to do a story of a man who was the central figure at a famous nightclub of the time, the Studio 54 of its day, the Mutiny Club, which happens to be Maurice's father, Roman.
I was going to ask, so when you bothered him with this crime story of like, hey, I got an idea.
Well, I told him in passing originally. I think him and some of the other producers were in a tent talking about Cocaine Cowboys, a documentary. Yeah. And I had come in and I said, my dad was a cocaine cowboy. And Chris was like, what? And I said, yeah, he ran a club called the Mutiny. And he was like,
well, correction, we were actually sitting on my balcony smoking cigars. And you further elaborated. And then I said to him what I say to anybody who pitches me a crime story, and it automatically stops it dead in its tracks, which is this: write something up about it. And nobody ever does. Nobody ever does. So it's not to say I wasn't interested on first glance at the story, but I was also very busy with Narcos. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, it took him 5 years, but I received a document 5 years later from him called North of Havana, and I read it and I thought, this is really, really kind of cool, I thought North of Havana was a good title, and at the same time, I needed a title that was going to just cut through the 500 channel universe. So Hotel Cocaine was to me one that just announces itself, and so working with Maurice and with other writers, we developed this premise, and for me what makes it a little different is you have the comedy character of Burton Greenberg, the owner of the hotel, which is kind of examining and skewering the me decade and the self-examination, and of course Burton gets deeply pulled into the crime game as the 8 episodes roll along, and then in the meanwhile we've got these great actors, Yul Vasquez, Danny Pino, Mark Feuerstein, and many others to play these roles that exist within the club. So I was aiming for kind of Narcos crossed with Boogie Nights, which is one of my favorite films, a genius film, and that sort of took a look at the late 70s, early 80s, with a touch of humor, but also a touch of violence and danger. So that was appealing to me.
It's a great way to describe that, too. For you, in those 5 years of trying to get these stories from your family, you translate it, process it, get it into a format.
And marry a journalist's girlfriend who actually wrote the document.
Wow.
Spoiler alert.
That's a byproduct of... but, you know...
I was like, this is so well written. I've never had an actor write something so brilliantly. Oh, this journalist.
Then he met my girlfriend, and she turned out she helped me a lot with the writing, indeed. So yeah, she is.
You mean
she's
like typing it and thinking
it through? Yeah, she actually took out all the. I'm very wordy sometimes, and so she was like, "Yeah, this is garbage. You got to take this out." She actually gave Chris a very presentable document, and now they're good friends because now he understands. He sees the hat trick.
I see the.
But yeah, Chris actually put my feet to the fire. It wasn't that I went back to my family's to get any more stories. Most of my family's dead. It was I was nervous. I'm truly an actor. Like every show that you mentioned, I've been in them. I've played parts in them.
Well, Narcos. Maurice had a very big role in Narcos.
Yeah,
that's why
I played twins in Boomtown, and I was a detective in SVU.
When I saw you as the co-EP, and I was like, why would you not have him on screen?
Oh, he will be.
Okay.
He will be. That's next year.
Show up.
I just didn't feel like having him whispering in my ear the whole
Chris,
season.
this is what my dad would have done. But yeah, he put my feet to the fire, and it's not that I got nervous. It's that I really didn't know how to tackle it. I didn't know how to sit down and actually write something out. At the same time, my partner, Lucy Sheriff, she's a journalist for the BBC. She was working at Columbia at the time, which actually she did the entire tour of everywhere that we stayed because we had already been there. And she was like, why don't you write this thing out? I was like, oh, Chris, want me to write a story about my dad? She's like, why don't you write it out? Like I can't. And she's like, why don't we meet in Miami? I'll meet you in front of the Mutiny, and we'll take a drive. You pitch me the story, and I will type it out for you. And that is exactly what happened. I met her in Miami. We rented a car. And in the time that it took us to get from the Mutiny to Key West, which is where I took her, I had pitched her the entire story. She wrote it out, and she said, all right, now let me go back and do my magic on this. She brought it back, and then we tweaked it a little bit. And here's the funny thing. I did not want to call Chris and tell him. He called me and said, have you ever written anything out? And I said, as a matter of fact, I did. And I sent him the thing, and then I didn't hear from him for a month, and I thought he hated it. And then he came back to me, asked me about my family, how are things doing, because he would check in on me. And then at the end of it, he goes, oh, by the way, I sent it to Michael Wright.
Well, what I did was Michael Wright is the truly excellent executive who runs MGM Plus, and is the type of person who I've developed a relationship with over these years. And I called him and I said, hey, I think I have a next show for you. It's called Hotel Cocaine, and think of the movie Casablanca and the Humphrey Bogart role. Well, now it's a Cuban American, and the backdrop isn't World War II, it's the war on drugs. And he said, go write it. Like, you usually have to do a pretty formal pitch. You usually have to go into a lot of detail about it. Now, I had done Godfather of Harlem for Michael. He has a very, in my opinion, very, very keen sense of what he wants for his channel, MGM Plus. And he also, he has good taste. And so he spotted it right away. He said, go write it. And the first draft I wrote edged even more into the Burton comedic side. So in his very sweet style, he called and he said, this is just a little too much into the comedic aspect. I want a little more focus on the Roman at the center of a drug-dealing brother and a DEA pursuer. And I said, oh, you want me to do what I do usually and temper down the comedy a little? And he said, yes. And then I turned that script around and gave it to him on a Friday, and he calls me on a Monday and he says, okay, we're making this. I mean, the level of non-BS with this guy is so great. You're just dealing with somebody who's very, very good at his job, which is picking the shows and helping to develop them. And then someone who's grateful to have that kind of belief in my work. Maurice was also spectacular during the whole time because he could have, sometimes when people do generate the idea that's the basis for a series, they can then be that fly in your ear who's always trying to get it shifted a certain way. And he basically said, I know Chris knows what he's doing, and he allowed for the show and the script to develop, and yes, he'll actually have a very juicy role in the second year.
He was a dream. Chris was the dream. Guillermo Navarro was the standard. I had seen Guillermo get a Lifetime Achievement Award one time, and I didn't know he got it after his Oscar, obviously, for Pan's Labyrinth, and I was in my head just putting everything together. And
Guillermo Navarro is Guillermo del Toro's cinematographer for all the great movies, and then branched out into his own directing career. And Guillermo and I formed a relationship on the show Hannibal, and I said, this guy's really, really talented director, and so, for instance, if you think the show at all replicates Miami of the time, if you can't believe what a magician this guy is with being able to do things. He shot every shot in the history of filmmaking because of his experience, and so he allowed us to get the show, which is done at a, by American standards, a reasonable price. He was able to get it done.
It looks great. I know one of the problems or challenges with adapting any kind of real story is that the climax may not land where real life doesn't play nicely like that. Was it difficult to take a personal story? I mean, you've also done these with Narcos, and these are real people, but you gotta make a season of television that I'll watch, not knowing this one.
Well, that's why Chris is the standard, because he was able to take Pablo's story, the story of a criminal, and make you sort of like him, which is a feat. It's a feat. And so when you have a person like that who is, he's able to make historical stuff, he's able to humanize people further than what even they knew they were capable of. I think that one of the great things that happened was that Chris tried to make Burton funny, because the levity that he adds to it when he adds what he's especially known for, which is adding these darker layers, actually makes this thing pop even more. Yeah. It's really wonderful.
The earnestness of Burton, like how honestly he believes that this is a
better world. Yeah,
and the mutiny needs to exist to make art. And like, it would be so easy to have it just be a criminal story, and there's so much family to it. For me, that's what it felt like separated it from Narcos. Like, well, why make? Is this just another set of Narcos on a different network? And no, Hotel Cocaine feels completely different, and I really think it owes to Roman's pull between the family, even more than recent Griselda or things like that include more family. There was something from Jump Street on Hotel Cocaine.
Well, I think along those lines, I think you're bringing up a good point. First thing is, I wasn't trying to glamorize Escobar and Narcos, nor, and I was surprised at the affection people had for him. Part of that is the incredible performance of Wagner Moura, who just draws you in. With Hotel Cocaine, Maurice's dad did not have an older brother. Maurice's father did not have an older brother who was a huge trafficker, though Roman Compte spent a lot of his time with huge drug dealers at the mutiny. So there was a large fictional component that had to be added, but I call that the plot level of fictional creation. Beneath it all, the immigration story, the being caught in this particular period of time when cocaine was viewed as relatively harmless while people were getting killed and murdered all the way back to South America, was something worth exploring and something absolutely true. I also think that you shouldn't do a show set in a period and spend all those extra millions of dollars unless you're trying to say something about today. We have immigration issues today. We have a left-right divide today. We have spiritual practices that are just as, wonky and silly as TM and navel gazing and, So in any case, the attempt is always to try to do a crime show, in my opinion, that has is turned a quarter to the left. So it's something you haven't seen before.
Well, it's a fantastic show that I've only got to see the screeners so far, but
only the first one.
Yeah, the first four.
The first four. Good.
Okay, good.
Great work, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Les.
TV Dudes is an independently run podcast out of Austin, Texas. We are exclusively listener supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/TVDudes.
You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at TV Dudes. All the music for our show is done by our friend and original TV dude Gregory J. Amani Smith.
To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com. I'm Randy Lander.
I'm Les Weiler.
And I'm Kyle Scott.
Thanks for listening.